not here, or even yourselves, can watch it again at a later date. And lastly, somewhere around here, there's a screen with a gentleman by the name of Ted Stark, who you don't know. Oh, there he is. He's just showing up. He's waving there at me and at you. Ted is a member of the Grimsby Probus Club, and he is a technical support person for Zoom for Probus District number 6, which is our district. And so he's here to help us in case we screw up. And he'll be around for the whole meeting, and I think he's going to join for the breakout rooms as well at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Marnie McLaughlin. You unmute yourself, Marnie, and away you go.
Good morning. And much as it's hard to find anything positive about what we're going through, one of the things is we're all comfy in our own homes, and oh my gosh, I've still got my house coat on. Just a minute. There we go. That's better. But isn't it? It is sort of nice. You're in your comfy chairs, I hope all. And cheers. Yes, it's coffee. We all can sit and have a drink and be comfortable in our own surrounds. But most of all, many thanks for you to be here with us today for our first, hopefully not too many, but our first Zoom meeting. It's a pleasure to have you all and see your faces again after 9 months. It's hard to believe. I hope no one's pregnant, by the way, but anyway, I don't think so. However, we're going through these crazy times, and I certainly hope that you've got a good supply of masks, and more importantly, wine or beer or whatever your choice of beverage is, and we'll get through it. So please, thanks again. And also a very special thanks as well from our president, Roland Wheeler, who unfortunately is unable to attend, but certainly sends his best wishes as well. Thank you all again. And we have a few items of business before we hear from our speaker. And it's my pleasure to introduce Canon David Ricketts, who is our district number 6 director and bringing information from Probus Canada. David? David, have you unmuted?
Yes, I have. Good morning, fellow Dundas Probians. I bring greetings from Probus Canada, from the board of directors, to this historic meeting in Dundas today. Nice to see my friend Ted Stark is here with us to assist in the technical aspects of this meeting. And I wish you all well. Of course, I'm a member of Dundas Probus Club as well, and I'm glad to see that we're actually getting together and having a great time. And I'm looking forward to hearing Marvin talk to us later on. Having me come, and oops, looks like something happened here.
Thank you, David. That's lovely. We appreciate that. And now next up is our assistant treasurer, Brian Fortune. Now, isn't that a good name for a treasurer? Brian?
Yes, I've been told that, Marnie. Good morning, everybody. I am pleased to advise that our accounts are in good order. They haven't changed much over the last 9 months. We have about $6,000 safely tucked away in the Royal Bank in Dundas, and our expenses are few, and our revenue is few, but that's okay. We're in good shape, so let's carry on that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Question?
No, guess not.
Yes, I do have a question.
Oh,
When I was calling people earlier this week, several of them asked me about the fees and what we were doing about that. So I just said that we were just not doing anything, but I don't know if that's true. So Brian, would you like to enlighten us?
Yeah, everyone is still a member of the club, and even though there are no dues being paid, probably until the end of this fiscal year, which is July, and then we will reassess and see where we're going to be going once we get back to live meetings, and we'll probably assess people proportionately for the amount of the year that we need to continue to pay rent, for example, to Amica. But at this point, there are no fees due. Nobody's past due. Everybody's up to date.
Very good. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I can't see, so. No? Okay. Of course, none of us can go on any trips, sadly, but our social chair, Vin Barr, has taken on a new look as our phone team coach. Vin?
Okay, hi everybody again. Yes, I wanted to first of all thank everybody that agreed to help with calling all the members once a month. We've got 11 of us who are doing the calling. There's Marg, Marnie, Maureen, Dave, Nick and myself who are part of the management team. And we've been lucky enough to have volunteers from the rest of the membership. So I'd like to give a special thanks to Anne, Dorothy, Barb, Rita, and Helen, who have all stepped in to help with the phoning. And I think we've all found this is a really good project because we seem to be getting to know people. The people that we call are, I think, are going to become our friends. And then when we finally get together in person, I think it would be great because we'll be able to chat in person and have a great reunion, and we'll feel we know more people in the club. So, and even now it's good to put faces to names. I'm seeing people who were just a name on my list, and it's lovely to actually see your faces. So let's hope we can carry on with this. So that's about it for me.
Okay, super. Now, of course, the big questions are who's going to be speaking coming up in the future? And for that, we'll move on to Dawn Eagleson, our program chair. Dawn? Oh, Dawn? Oh, there.
I just had a problem unmuting there, sorry.
Oh.
For January meeting, we're going to have Keith Green speaking to us along with a movie of his mom. She worked in Winston Churchill's war room during the war and has some sort of observations that she will be explaining on the film. So that's what we have for January. Beyond January, we haven't scheduled anything at this time. That's my report for now.
Thank you. Okay. Last, but certainly not least, is our entertaining membership chair, Marg Wilby. Marg?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we're muted.
Okay. Our current membership stands at 92. Jim Suinaga passed away a couple of days ago, so that's very sad, but that reduces our numbers by 1. We have about 10 people on our waiting list, and we're going to contact these people after Christmas. And I've also received a couple of new inquiries in the last couple of months, so we can take a look at them as well. That's it for the membership. Do anybody have any questions there? No? Okay, so I guess you want a joke, huh? Okay.
That's all we
so-
really want, but yeah.
Yes, I know, I know. I have a Christmas one, but I also have this one. In a convent in Ireland, can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
Yes? Okay,
Yeah.
in a convent in Ireland, the 98-year-old Mother Superior lay dying. The nuns gathered around her bed, trying to make her last journey comfortable. They tried giving her warm milk to drink, but she refused it. One of the nuns took the glass back to the kitchen and then, remembering that a bottle of Irish whiskey had been received as a gift the previous Christmas, so she opened it and poured a generous amount into the warm milk. Back at Mother Superior's bed, they held the glass to her lips, and the frail nun drank a little, then a little more. And before they knew it, she had finished the whole glass, down to the last drop. As her eyes brightened, the nuns thought it would be a good opportunity to have one last talk with their spiritual leader. Mother, the nuns asked earnestly, please give us some of your wisdom before you leave us. The mother raised herself up in bed on one elbow, looked at them very seriously, and don't sell that cow. Okay, do you want this one's not all that funny, but it's in the vein of Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and Santa was ticked. He cussed out the owls and threw down his list. Miserable little brats, ungrateful little jerks. I have a good mind to scrap the whole works. I've busted my gut for darn near a year. Instead of thanks, Santa, what do I hear? The old lady complains because I work late at night, and the elves want more money, and the reindeers all fight. Rudolph got drunk and annoyed all the maids, and Donner is pregnant, and Vixen has AIDS. And just when I thought things would get better, those twits at the CRA sent me a letter. They say I owe taxes. Now that's really funny. Whoever sent Santa any money? The kids today, they all are the pits, not interested in trains or any girly bits. I spent a whole year making wagons and sleds, assembling dolls, their arms, legs, and heads. I made a ton of yo-yos and no request for them. They all want computers and robots. They think I'm IBM. Flying through the air, dodging all the trees, falling down chimneys and skinning my knees. I'm quitting this job. There's just no enjoyment. Think I'll sit on my duff and collect unemployment. So there's no Christmas this year. You now know the reason. I found me a blonde, and we're going south for the season.
Very good. Thanks, Mark.
That's it for me.
That's great. Thank you. Dave, can I ask you please to introduce our speaker?
Very good. Thanks, Marty. Over the past weeks, chatting with Probus members about today's meeting, frequently I was asked, who's the speaker? And I'd mention Marvin Ryder. And then I'd get a typical response like, hey, that's great. I saw him last night on Cable 14, or I heard him on CHML, and he was on CBC. That's the Marvin that comes to mind. However, he is also an associate professor of marketing at McMaster University, the Groot School of Business, and has been teaching for the past 35 years. We also may forget that he has a long association and active involvement in many aspects of our greater Hamilton community. He was chair, member of the board of directors, Hamilton Health Sciences, responsible for all the Hamilton hospitals except St. Joseph's. He is vice chair, Hamilton Health Sciences Research Institute, which manages an endowment and funds healthcare research at Hamilton Health Sciences hospitals and McMaster University. Well, I wish I had more time to recount his many other roles, all in wide-ranging facets of our community. It's not surprising, with his wonderful insights and experiences into all matters that affect our daily lives, that Marvin is such a popular media commentator and a much sought after speaker. So Marvin, welcome. In fact, welcome back. This is your second visit to our club. I think the last one was many years ago at the golf club when we were still up there. We're delighted as always, and it's great fun to have you here, particularly at this critical time.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you all for having me back. Let me just start by saying, when Dave invited me, he shared that you typically meet Tuesdays, I think it was, or one of these Thursdays maybe. And unfortunately, I had a class at that time, and I just couldn't get free until maybe later in December. So you folks were nice enough to move your meeting to Wednesday, and I definitely appreciate that. Margaret, if you want to add one to your list, you folks look like a politically correct group, so I'll try to tell you a politically correct joke. A farmer has 3 daughters, all of dating age, and this concerns him because he wants to make sure his daughters are seeing very good young men. So this Friday night, he decides he's going to hang around the front door, and as each of them arrive, he's just going to check them out to make sure they're okay. So pretty soon there's a knock at the door. He opens the door, and there's a nice looking young man there who steps in, and the young man says, "Hi, my name is Eddie. I'm here for your daughter, Betty. I'm taking her for spaghetti. Can you tell me if she's ready?" And the farmer thinks to himself, well, nice young man, nice young man. No, she's not ready just yet, but you wait in the front parlor and Betty will be down in a few moments. And he thinks, well, good. That's a good one. That's a keeper. And so pretty soon there's a second knock at the door, and he opens the door, and another nice looking young man steps in, and he says, "Hi, my name is Joe. I'm here for your daughter, Flo. I'm taking her to the show. Is she ready to go?" And he says, "No, I'm sorry. She's not just yet. She's upstairs with Betty getting ready. But if you don't mind waiting in the parlor, I'm sure she'll be down in a couple of minutes." And he's thinking to himself, 2 for 2. Wow, what are the odds of this? And pretty soon there's a third knock at the door, and he opens the door. Another good looking young man steps in, and he says, "Hi, my name is Chuck." So he shot him. I'll let your own minds fill in the blanks on the rhymes there. It's if you tell that with a younger crowd, that tells you something about where they're at. Well, I feel like I should say to you, hello, class, because this is the way I teach now on Zoom. Later today, I have a class using case discussions, and this is exactly what I see. I see a Zoom grid. I went out and acquired what's called an i7 processor computer, because on Zoom, that allows me to see up to 49 people simultaneously, and that is roughly my class sizes at university, so I can just see everybody in the grid. And as you've already figured out, the most common phrase in Zoom meetings is, you have to unmute. You need to unmute. Everyone wants to talk, but they don't remember to press that button as you go. So we're going to have that challenge today for this reason. I don't plan to talk at you for the next 40 minutes or so. What I'd like to do is make this somewhat interactive. So here's my plan. And Dave said this was okay, so blame him if it's not. I'm going to just go through, establish a little baseline about where the Canadian economy is today for you. And then after I do that, that'll take me 10 to 15 minutes. What I'd really like to do is throw the floor open to you, see what questions that you have on your mind, and see if I can answer them. Now, I do need to warn you, I'm pretty good at this, but because of the diversity of the crowd, you could very well ask me something that I don't have an answer for, and I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. But generally speaking, and this is why the media people keep calling, whatever it is, oddly enough, I seem to know something about it. So we'll see how that goes today. But let me start with the Canadian economy. That's probably the biggest question on your mind. How is it? And I have probably odd news to tell you, and that is just fine, thank you. It's good. Now, it is absolutely true. If we can roll the tape back to January, February, we were chugging along. Well, this year, we were expecting about 1.8% growth in the economy. Not great, not bad, just, pretty average. And then COVID strikes us, And in March, and specifically in April, we really shut down the economy. You began to hear this phrase of non-essential businesses. They had to shut down, they had to lock down. And so hairstyling salons, clothing stores, shoe stores, even restaurants had to move to online. And that caused our economy to drop down. Because that happened in March, which is in the first quarter, and April, which is in the second quarter, we had 2 quarters of negative economic growth, which is the definition of a recession. So Canada was in a recession in the first half of this year. There is no doubt about it. The decline in March was so severe, it negated what we did in January, February, and April was so bad, it didn't really matter how good May and June were, it was going to have a negative number. However, after April, every month since, May, June, July, August, September, we don't have October's data yet, but every one of those 5 months, the economy grew and grew at some rather large rates. In the third quarter of this year, that's the quarter that ended on September 30th, if you just looked at that quarter alone, the Canadian economy was growing, and now hopefully you've got something strong in your coffee there. The Canadian economy in that period grew at an annualized rate of 46%. We've never seen numbers like that, ever. We didn't see numbers like that bouncing back out of the Great Depression. So what this is telling us is that we're really truly having what's called a V-shaped recovery. We dropped down quite precipitously, but we've bounced back quite well. Are we back to where we were in January, February? No, not quite. But, you know, in a very short period of time, we have come a really, really long way. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. The stock market. Don't know if you pay attention to these things, but yesterday, the US stock market, for the first time in its history, crossed 30,000 points. It's just a number, but it tells you that given how badly stocks fell in March and April, they've completely bounced back. Then the Canadian stock market is now flirting at over 17,000 points and probably will be setting a new record of its own in the next little while. It's come back quite nicely. Retail sales went down, have come back. Cross-border truck traffic, an indication of trade between our nations, have come back to pre-COVID levels. The only thing that has not come back is unemployment. Before this happened in January, February, Canadian unemployment was running around 5.5%. Now, it is true that in every month since March and April, May, June, July, August, even September and October, the number has been coming down. October's unemployment rate, 8.9%, was 5.5, is now 8.9%. And here, if there's a downside to our recovery, is probably on the unemployment numbers. I don't think that number is going to improve when we get November's unemployment rate next Friday around December the 4th. And the reason for that is Canada's largest chunk of the economy in the Toronto area is back into lockdown. More businesses are declared essential. So, you know, if we're lucky, it'll stay at 8.9%. But here just before Christmas, I expect we're going to go back up to maybe 9.5%. And I think that is now to be expected, that this is kind of the new baseline. What the federal and the provincial government are trying desperately to do is avoid an absolute lockdown of the economy, mostly because we probably can't afford another round of the supports that the federal government did. Now, I don't know how you feel. I don't want to make this a political discussion. Probably some of you hate Justin Trudeau and some of you think he's good and some of you are in the middle on all this. I think we need to remember that our premiers, all the premiers and our prime minister have never gone through something like this. And so they're making it up on the fly. And so on one hand, they wanted people to stay at home, isolate, not pass the disease around, but yet how do you support those people? So that's when we invented things like the CERB and the emergency commercial rent assistance, and there were some other of these programs. Most of those have come to an end. There is a new program that just launched this week to help retailers with and other small businesses with their rents during this time. And the difference between it and the first program was the first one engaged the landlord. The second one, it's now directly to the small business owner themselves. And yes, you know, our deficit has ballooned this year. It's probably Chrystia Freeland's going to give you an update next week, but probably again in that 340, 350 billion, that's with a B, billion-dollar range. Big number. 2/3 of that number due to these special programs, this special spending, one third due to reduced government revenues. And so I'm not quite as worried about that 1/3, because when those people start working again, the government will get some of that money back. And here's another little surprise for people. The CERB, the CERB, is a taxable benefit. People got it with no tax withholding. They got their $2,000 with no tax withholding. But guess what? When they file their taxes in 2021, they're going to have to pay taxes. So, you know, the government's going to get back some of that money in March and April of next year. So I'm not completely worried about it as a one-time event. I would be worried if this now becomes the new norm. So for me, I'm more interested in what Chrystia Freeland's going to do in the next budget. And again, this is going to sound bizarre to you. If Chrystia Freeland is able to bring down a budget for 2021-22 with only a $50 billion budget, she's going to be declared a hero. Whereas 2 years ago, if the Liberals had brought in a $50 billion budget, you'd be wanting to string them up from a tree. And again, it's just a sign of this recovery and hoping that we can get back to some kind of a normal that looks like the old normal at some point in the next year. And just again, I'm not a medical person, but on that front, it now appears more and more that the only thing that will get us back to an old normal is this vaccine. Great news in these last few weeks. We now know of at least 3 different vaccines, all of which seem to be fairly effective, that will start to roll out in early 2021. Obviously, the frontline people will be people with comorbidity factors, people in long-term care homes, people who are on the front line of healthcare, doctors and nurses. The rest of us may have to come a little later, probably more March, April. Some of the vaccines are a one-shot vaccine. Some of them require you to have 2 shots spaced 3 weeks apart. But if we can get these things out there and deployed in the first half of the year, there's a pretty good chance that by the time the second half of the year comes around, we might have enough herd immunity that we can come back out of this cocooning. So in other words, for you folks, I have bad news. You're probably going to be doing Zoom meetings right through to the summer of 2021. But I think there is a good possibility that come the fall of 2021, you might be able to come back and meet in person and enjoy fellowship there. So from the economic standpoint, really good news. Let me just give you one more, the Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar. Now you've kind of gotten used to the Canadian dollar floating around 75 cents US. Back in March and April, when there was great fear in the world, we saw a lot of people flock to American dollars, selling other currencies, and the Canadian dollar went down a little bit. And there were nice people, nice colleagues of mine who said, well, here it is. You know, it's going to go to 65 cents US, 62 cents US. Oh, well, yeah, it got down to 72, maybe even 71. Today, it's flirting with 77 cents US. And there is a thinking that given now renewed strength in the oil sector, we may see a Canadian dollar getting close to 80 cents US, 80 cents US. Not necessarily by January 1, but in the first half of 2021, the Canadian dollar is actually doing very well. So I realize there's all this gloom and doom around COVID, and I think that's not wrong to be worried and concerned. But if economically, we have come roaring back. Last but not least, and then I'll throw it open to you, interest rates. Now, I'm not that much different than you. I'm 62. I can see that most of you appear to be 63 or 64. So we're all in the same generation. But many of you have retirement funds. You've saved for your retirement, and of course you need to invest those. My parents, who've unfortunately been long gone, my mother died 25 years ago, my dad 35 years ago, they would used to invest in GICs, guaranteed investment certificates, and those are terrible investments today. With the prime borrowing rate of the Bank of Canada at 0.25%, you know, if you're lucky, you can get a GIC that pays you 1.5, and that's not much of a return on your investment. However, if you were a little bit younger than you and starting off, think of what this means in terms of mortgages. You can get a mortgage today in Canada between 2.5% and 3%. 2.5% and 3%. I bought my first home in 1987, and my mortgage rate, and it was a special deal through the builder of my home and CIBC, was 11.5%. 11.5%. When my dad died in 1983, you could get a 1-year mortgage around there at 21%. And that was not from, you know, Jojo, the lender, you know, psst, hey buddy, you need some cash. You know, this wasn't somebody with the mafia. This is what the big banks were. 21%, 2.5%, 2.7%. Incredible. This is well below the Canadian average mortgage rate for the last 150 years, which is typically around 5. And the Bank of Canada has now come out and said that they don't anticipate moving their trend setting rate 0.25%. They don't think they're going to move it at all in 2021. Possibly at some point in 2022, they'll start moving it, but they're only planning to move it a 1/4 point at a time. Conceivably, even by the end of 2022, their interest rate might be getting close to 1%, which now makes a mortgage in the low 3%, 3 to 3.5, somewhere in that range. This is just an incredible time. So guess what's been happening? People have been borrowing money specifically to buy houses. And the housing market has remained very, very strong. Not necessarily in terms of numbers of units. We're not seeing a lot of units for sale, but those that are for sale, almost every one of them is selling for more than it was listed for. Now, I live in Dundas, and I built a home there for me in 1995. I back onto the escarpment, so I have no neighbors behind me. My neighbor is actually, I think it's either the Royal Botanical Gardens or the Conservation Authority land, train track above me. I built that home for roughly $325,000 in 1995. To give you a sense of it, because I was property rich but cash poor, my banker, which oddly enough was something called HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, I needed, you know, full cash financing to help me build that house. I got the single biggest mortgage they wrote that month at $325,000. Now, mind you, I had it paid off in 5 months when my new house was done and I sold the other houses. So I think of my house as, okay, that's good. And I see what the assessed value is from MPAC when they send me these things. I've had real estate agents tell me I could easily get $1 million for my house. And I look at them as if they've got a second head growing out of their shoulders. How is that possible? $1 million? But that's how desperate some people are to get into this market and take advantage of these low interest rates. So if you're thinking of changing your accommodations, perhaps downsizing out of a house and looking at a condo or looking at some rental accommodation, you may just be shocked at the value that you've accumulated in your house in the last little while. Now, I've rattled on here probably for a little more than 10 minutes, probably more like 20. Why don't I stop there? Dave and I are going to try to coordinate questions. Now, here's what I tell my students, and I'll tell you the same thing. There are 2 ways for you to get my attention. One is to simply wave your hand like this. However, that might make you feel self-conscious until you've had your first wine of the day, and then it might not make you feel so bad. The other thing you can do in Zoom, they've actually got a raise hand button that you can click, and you get this little symbol. It's a blue symbol with a white hand up like that. Either one of those will work. Let me see if you've got any questions that I can answer for you. Brian?
I unmuted. Your comments about interest rates, Marvin. What is going to be the trigger going forward to get those interest rates moving back up again? And how long do you think it's going to be before we start to see things change in a positive direction for people like us who are looking for interest rates to support our lifestyles.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the problem, Brian, is that COVID-19 is like a stationary hurricane. We would like the hurricane to move off so then we can do whatever repairs are necessary and we can resume the life we had before the hurricane hit. But it's a stationary hurricane. It's staying over top of us. Now, it's true that for a couple of months, it looked like it was ebbing. It was getting smaller and we could take some positive steps. But then, of course, you know, it's come roaring back in the last little while. And we really need COVID to start to disappear. Back 20 years ago, we had a terrible disease called SARS. And most of you might remember living through SARS. And at that time, I was actually chair of the board at Hamilton Health Sciences. We had to stop meeting in the hospital for fear of SARS and contamination and the patients, what have you. So we started meeting in hotels. And I realized you say to yourself, well, that's not a good expenditure of the money. There are perfectly good meeting rooms there. Yeah, but health trumped it. The difference between COVID-19 and SARS is that SARS went away. It was bad in the spring of a year. Summer came, the number of cases went down, no surprise, but people said, wait. And when the winter came, it didn't come back. And I can't tell you where it went, but it never came back. It went away of its own. We were hoping that maybe COVID would do that. Maybe the disease would somehow mutate and that would cause it to disappear, but it hasn't. And it's come back. And the second wave, as you know, you can visit any website you want and you'll see that the numbers in this second wave are much worse than the first wave. So if I'm the government trying to establish policy frameworks, I can't do that until I know which way COVID is going. This is why, and I know people have been very upset at Justin Trudeau, you should have brought a budget. You should have brought a budget. Well, you can't budget if you don't know what the future is going to have for you. And so Chrystia Freeland next week is going to give you an economic update. And even a couple of weeks ago, the provincial government gave you an update, a budget. But in their budget, they actually gave you 3 different scenarios because they don't know which way it's going to go. So I think before you're going to see interest rates go up, we need to wrestle this disease down to something much less than it is, and that the hurricane moves on and we can start to rebuild, reopen, and get back to some level of normalcy. Right now, given the vaccines, I just don't think you're going to see any of that until the latter half of 2021. And the Bank of Canada even thinks it'll be 2022. So that storm that's hitting us, you just got to batten down the hatches. It's going to keep blowing and hitting us at least for another 6 to 8 months, at least. Now, I think one of the Tuckers had a hand up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, where is your instead of waving, where is your button for just to click the button?
Okay, good question. Let me just see. Because I
it.
don't raise my hand to talk to myself. Let me see if I can find it here. No, those are reactions. Okay, it's not there. No. Where's our technical person there from Grimsby? Ted?
It's okay. It's not that important.
Yes.
Oh, well, we should know because you're going to have more meetings here.
It is in reactions, Marvin.
It's reactions?
Yeah, if you look at reactions and click on it, you should get a whole bunch of them. And
yes,
Oh.
but I don't actually get the
Oh,
hands
I
up
see.
one.
Yeah, I see. Okay, but I do have a question.
Fire away.
What is happening to all these places like imports on Meadowlands and they have totally closed down. They're totally gone out of business. What's happened to those people?
So I think I got most of that. You were talking about importing and exporting?
Well, no. You have these smaller stores, these smaller, because that's really a franchise, but a small franchise. All these smaller businesses, they can't with the lockdowns, and they lose everything.
Yeah,
What's
they
happening
could.
to those people?
So to your question, let me just make it clear for everybody else. Toronto and the Peel region have gone into lockdown, and so again, non-essential stores, many retail stores have been told to close. earlier this week, I want to tell you, it was Monday afternoon, the Canadian Retail Council went to Premier Ford and said, look, we don't think this is fair. You're allowing Costco to stay open. You're allowing Walmart to stay open because they sell food, but they also sell a whole lot of other items. And people go into these stores, they're not just buying food, they're buying light bulbs and t-shirts and underwear or whatever else. That's not fair to these other retailers. And as well, the Canadian Retail Council noted that to the extent we've done contact tracing, less than 10% of COVID cases can be connected to a retail exposure. In other words, when you actually ask people, well, where do you think you got exposed to COVID now that you've tested positive? The biggest source of this is person-to-person contact in a social setting, people attending a wedding or a funeral or a feast or something like this. And so the Retail Council saying, I think you're sort of taking it out on these small retail enterprises, and yet they're not really the ones to blame for the second wave. And this is what they counter proposed to the Premier. Could we stay open, but with restrictions? So for instance, they propose that for some of these smaller retail stores, they might limit themselves to no more than three staff members, and no more than 3 customers in the store at any one time. If you had more people, somebody'd have to wait outside until somebody left. To me, that seems like a very reasonable response, especially because this period of time, November, December, for most retail stores represents half their revenue in the year. This big rush towards Christmas causes everyone to open up their pocketbooks and spend. And if you stop these retailers, especially now, you're probably going to see a lot of them fold in 2021. So I have not heard, so they had their meeting. Mr. Ford did not come out and announce anything on Tuesday. I'll be curious to see if before the week is done that maybe he'll crack this open a little bit. Even restaurants, in terms of spread of COVID, we're not hearing of it being a hotbed of spreading. We are hearing about bars. So for instance, we're not hearing about people going to Swiss Chalet, having a quarter chicken dinner and coming back with COVID. But we are hearing about relatively young people going to a bar, having some beers, dancing up a storm, and the next thing you know, they've passed COVID to one another. So it does feel a little bit like the government, who feels pressured to do something, is doing something, but that may not be the right thing. And I'll be very interesting to see. I have great sympathy for these smaller retail stores. In Dundas the other day, my battery in my watch went, and there's a lovely little shop just on the main street in Dundas, and a fellow has his watchmaking business there, and he was able to, open the back of my watch, pop in a battery, whatever it wasn't a big deal. I'd hate to see somebody like that suddenly shut down for 4 or 5 weeks, because if you don't have revenue coming in, but you still have all of your costs, in particular the cost of the rent, how are you supposed to survive? So I think you raise a really good question, and hopefully, one, we won't have broader lockdowns. We're all holding our breath here in the greater Hamilton area about that. But in those areas where there is a lockdown, can we crack open the door a little bit to those retailers who are truly doing a great job?
Yeah, like they did in the beginning when they opened up the lockdown and went to the Dundas Plaza, the Home Depot. They would only let in 3 or 4 people at the same, and Piconis did the same, and a lot of these small stores. And I don't think it's fair to lock these people down. If they follow the rules, then there's no problem, because I'd much rather go to Home Depot than Canadian Tire.
Or I'd rather go to Home Hardware than either of those.
Home Hardware.
Home Hardware, I mean.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean Home, I mean Home Hardware.
I got it.
Yeah, Home Hardware.
I got it.
Yeah,
and think about this for a second. My students say, oh, well, it's not a big deal to me because I just order everything online. If you need a light bulb, a bulb goes out in a lamp. You're not going to order it online from Amazon and pay $20 to ship you a $2 light bulb. You'd want to walk into a store, and your exposure in a store. When I go to Home Hardware, I'm in and out in less than 5 minutes. I get the bulb, I check out, I leave. This is not, I'm going to be there for the next 3 hours talking to my friends and having a party. It's in, out, done. So I think many of these smaller businesses could be open and survive. One little thing, if you don't mind a little dig at Doug Ford, by the way,
No, no
essential
problem.
businesses include, of course, drugstores, they include grocery stores, and of course, the liquor outlets and the beer outlets. You've got to
Of
make sure
course.
those are open to keep people stocked during this time of COVID.
Thank you.
Other questions I can answer for you? Anne? Now, Anne, you need to unmute your microphone there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Put aside the impact of COVID on our economy currently, what is the best thing that Canadians can do to support its own economy in regular times? We shop at places like Dollarama.
Mhm.
What would be your advice on how we as individual Canadians can best support our economy in regular times?
Yeah, and I know the answer to that question leads to is to buy Canadian, to always look for made in Canada products. But that doesn't always help. Let me just give you an example. You probably know that there are cars that we would probably call Japanese cars, but they are assembled in Canada, and they're assembled with parts from around the world. So if I buy a Canadian assembled Japanese car with parts from around the world, I am helping the Canadian economy. Walmart, people say, oh, don't go to Walmart, don't go to Walmart, support your little, well, the Walmart employs local people. I've had people talk about restaurants, don't help those chains, don't help that McDonald's, that big, well, but it employs local people and it's run by a local franchisee. So I think you've got to be a little careful on this buy Canadian strategy. I'm all for it if you can find products that truly are manufactured here. But if they employ Canadians in getting the products to market, we want to see them continue on. So here's the odd answer to your question. The worst thing you can do is just stop spending. And yet that's what many people are doing. Here's a funny benefit of COVID-19. We were worried at the start of this year about the Canadian debt load. The average Canadian person had $1.65 of debt for every dollar of income they had in. It's actually come down. It's now about $1.53 of debt for every dollar they've got of income because people have either been paying down expenses or they've been saving money. I know personally, I normally travel 2 or 3 times a year. I had planned to visit Egypt this year in early May. I was going to, see the pyramids, see the tombs, cruise down the Nile, go to Abu Simbel and the rest of it. None of that happened. It's been delayed until 2021. And even now, the company tells me they're not getting enough people signing up for the trip. So I may have to delay it till 2022. Wasn't an inexpensive trip, but I didn't take it. So I increased my TFSA contributions this year. I had a little extra room. And so I topped them up to make it nice and full. And we're seeing a lot of that. And that's good for you personally. But I think the worst thing we can do is just try to withdraw completely and not spend. So if you can try to keep doing what you were doing, I can tell you, I don't know if you've done this, but I've actually gone to restaurants. And when I have gone to restaurants, I've asked to be seated in very visible places in the restaurants so that other people could see me. Now, I'm trying to be really careful here. I am not a celebrity. I'm not a famous person per se, but I do have a recognizable face. And I think it's important for us to be seen as participating. So, I ate in a restaurant that was in Jackson Square and I sat by a window and a number of people who walked by sort of pointed at me and waved, and you're eating at a restaurant? And I said, yes, it's perfectly safe to do so. I'll tell you as well, when the vaccine comes out, whenever I will be allowed to get it, I will get it. And if people say to me, can we take a picture of you getting it? Absolutely. Because I think it's important that leaders in the community step forward to indicate to the rest of the people this is safe and that it's important for us to do. So that's the worst thing you can do, Anne, is withdraw. Try to buy Canadian, but that's really hard to do because there are products that maybe you take wine, for instance. There is wine that is made in Niagara using grape juice from other parts of the world. So they import the juice, then they ferment it there and they put it in the bottles. Is that Canadian wine? Is that, I don't know. And to try to trace all that down to the last degree, I'm not sure everyone's got that much time and patience. So support your businesses, support your local communities. Don't withdraw into isolation. If you can find Canadian made products, of course, support them. But the worst thing you can do is just stop spending. Dave, we may have exhausted them.
Oh my gosh.
Gord.
Gord Cameron.
Gord, you got to unmute. Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, I did.
Am I on mute now?
Yes, yeah, I did it.
Gord Cameron.
Nobody's asked me to do that before.
Yes, I know. It sounds kind of dirty, doesn't it? Unmute yourself, Gord.
I'm looking forward tonight to watching the Monk interview with one of the top financial politicians in China. And the subject is going to be the future economic and political competition between China and the United States, and secondly, between their form of government and ours. And his hypothesis is that our form of government and form of economy is on the downslide, and that as with COVID, their system of government is in fact more effective, and that very few Chinese would be willing to change it for ours. Real dynamite subject. And that's on tonight at 8 if anybody's interested on the Monk debates. But what's your thought about the future position of Canada in this competition between China and the United States, and the kind of economic phenomenon that has occurred in the last 20 or 30 years of the loss of the middle class? Thank you.
Gord, to answer your question, I got to separate two halves of what you're talking about here. You're talking about their political system, and then you're talking about economics. If you talk about political systems, I think most political scientists would tell you that the most efficient form of government in the world is called a benevolent dictator. You don't waste time with a whole lot of meetings. You don't waste time with a whole lot of elections. You have this benevolent, all-wise, all-seeing, wonderful person, and they make decisions on behalf of their subjects. Of course, the problem with benevolent dictatorships is the dictator benevolent to everybody? And inevitably, this is their downfall, because I do well for this group of people, but I don't do well for that group of people. And eventually that group of people get mad enough that I'm overthrown, and they do something else. Democracies are inherently messy. And forgive me again, I don't know you folks at all. I don't really know your feelings, but I'm just going to say this out loud. The last 4 years with Donald Trump as president of the United States proves to you that democracies are inherently messy. I never believed in my lifetime I would see a person elected to the presidency who so demeaned the job. He was not presidential. Now, I get it that people liked him being a little rough around the edges and his rough talk and what have you, but that's not the way a president should behave. And even in these last couple of weeks, as there's begun a transition to Biden, I don't know if Biden's going to be a really good president or not, but he certainly seems presidential. But democracies, this is the risk you run. You don't have to have an IQ test before you push the button. Yes, Joe Biden now has crossed 80 million votes, 80 million votes for Joe Biden. But Trump, in losing, got 74 million. He's actually had the second biggest vote total of anybody for the presidency in the history of the United States. 74 million people voted for him. So, democracy, I don't know if I want to get into the political side of this. I can tell you that China, and I've been lucky enough to visit China a few times, up here, their government is called communist. But underneath it all is a hotbed of entrepreneurship. Anytime I've been there and teaching people, if you happen to let it be known that you're looking for something. So I told the story to my students one day. I'd gone to something called the Silk Market, and I saw this shirt I really liked, but it was in red, and I really wanted it in navy blue. and the shopkeeper, the stall keeper, didn't have it in navy blue. So, you know, you can't have everything, ha, 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 ha. By the end of that class, I was teaching 30 people. 6 of them had found the shirt in blue. They wanted to know how many I wanted, where I wanted them shipped. Would this be an appropriate price point? They were all really happy to make some money. So there's still a lot of our system, our entrepreneurial system at play in China, even though you've got this communist government at the top. But let's just talk economics for a second. America is the largest economy in the world, and Canada has enjoyed a wonderful standard of living beside the largest economy in the world. The United States is our biggest trading partner, and generally speaking, we're the United States' biggest trading partner, although today it's kind of a three-way race with China and Mexico as well, but most of the times we're on top of that. How wonderful and how easy it has been. I tell my students at the university, those days are gone. Those days are gone. Why? Because China is going to surpass the United States as the world's largest economy, and they're going to do it in the decade ahead. I don't necessarily want to give you a year. I'll say 2025. It could be 26. It could be 27. And there is nothing that Donald Trump, there's nothing that Joe Biden, there's nothing that any of the presidents of the United States can do. China is just this juggernaut economically. And most of us here remember when Nixon went to China and then followed Trudeau went to China, and we had a peek behind the bamboo curtain, and what we saw was a large population that seemed desperately behind the times. And in roughly 50 years, look at how it's changed. Tremendously industrial people, meaning they'll do anything, it seems, to get ahead as they go. And I just don't think you can stop that. So the question now is, how do we live in this new world that China is the dominant economic power? There was a movie called Spider-Man, and when Spider-Man became Spider-Man, he was bitten by a radioactive spider. His uncle said to him, well, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm not sure China has got that part figured out just yet. The United States has always taken on this mantle of responsibility. They've kind of been the world's police officers. Hey, you people over there, shut down, calm down. Oh, I don't like, we'll move in, we'll remove that despot. And they've flexed their muscle all over the place. China has been very happy to sit back and let the United States continue to do that. But if you're the #1 economic power, don't you have some responsibility? And the best example there I can give you, Gord, is North Korea. What the hell is going on with North Korea? Here is this dictatorship, a country where citizens are starving. They're not getting the food they need. And he's trying to build nuclear weapons and fly them off in the air and you know, tin pot dictator, so to speak. China supports North Korea. North Korea wouldn't even be what it is today if it wasn't for trade with China. China's got to step up to the table here. Now, in fairness, China has begun to step up a bit in places like Africa and some other developing nations in Asia, but you know, it's been the easy kind of development. Sooner or later, they're going to have to step up. And by the way, Gord, looking into my crystal ball, let me tell you a couple other things. The United States falls to #2 until probably the year 2050. Around then, India becomes the #2 economic power. And that will continue till around 2100, when either the Philippines or the Indonesia will fall into the #3 spot and the United States will come down. I'm sharing all this with you because if I can roll the clock back to a year 1900, in 1900, the dominant economic power in the world was a country called Great Britain. The sun never set on the British Empire. They were the dominant economic power in the world. But after 2 world wars in the 1950s, the United States had blown past Britain to become the dominant economic force. And Britain didn't know what to do when they lost that mantle. You can take a look at the 1960s and the 1970s in Britain, and those were not happy years. People were a little lost. And of course, you had the hippie movement and the student uprisings. Yes, you had the Beatles and the Mop Tops, but it was not a happy time. Now, I'm not trying to praise her, but when Margaret Thatcher came around, what she did was she stepped up and she said, you know, it's okay. It's okay that we're not #1 anymore. We can still wield power. We're in the top 5. Look, it's okay. And that bit of pride, that bit of just refocusing allowed Britain to recapture. And Britain today is in a much better spot than it was if you look in the 1950s and 60s. Now, my question is the United States going to have to go through 2 decades of trying to find itself as it loses the mantle of economic power? Or will the leaders, in particular the president, lead them to a good, proud place as number 2? And I don't know. Trump certainly wasn't. Trump certainly said, I want to go back. I want to go back to when we were the number 1 people. It's America first. We're always going to be the leaders. You know, I want to capture that and hold on to it. And I get that philosophy, but it's not in tune with the world. That's floating away from you. You're much better off to grab onto the reality. And I'm just going to tell you one other quick thing. If I go back about 12 years ago, one of the campaigns, either at the time Obama first got elected or the second time, there was a Republican that was running for president of the United States named John Huntsman. John Huntsman had been governor in Utah and then had been named ambassador to China. And he attempted to run. He didn't succeed, but he attempted to run. And I can remember that there was a debate between the leaders of the Republican Party seeking for the Republican nomination. And the question came up from the moderator, you know, what are we going to do about China? And when they got to Mr. Huntsman, he began his answer in Chinese. He was fluent in Chinese, and he began his answer in Chinese. And the audience gasped, you know, how dare you speak Chinese? We're American. But his point that he was trying to make was, we have to find a way to work with these people as opposed to work against these people. And I thought, wow, he's kind of got this message. And if I look at George W. Bush and I look at Barack Obama, both of them realized that America's economic hold was weakening. So when they tried to do something with foreign policy, they always formed a coalition. They always got a coalition of countries. Not just us, it's the coalition of the countries. I think that's what you're going to see. So this multinational integration, whether it's through NATO or the Trans-Pacific Partnership or through the European Union, this is going to be then the counterbalance to China as it goes. And I think you're going to see more of that ahead, not less of that. Sorry, Gord, that was a long answer to a short question.
Marvin, I think the Tuckers have a question.
Okay. This looks like Tucker number 1 or 2.
Number two.
Number 2.
I'm not the number 1.
Okay.
Maybe in 2025.
No.
Marvin, just a quick question. You talked about the number 1 economic power in the world and the change probably over maybe to China and then ultimately to India. Does number 1 economic power also go along with number 1 military power? Because it seems to me the two have been linked for a number of years, going back to Great Britain.
Yeah, so on the question of military power, the United States spends more on its military than the next 14 countries in the world. And let me make that clear to you. If you add up what the next 14 countries spend on the military, add that together, it's still less than what the America spends. And of those 14 countries, 13 of them are allies with the United States. Only one of them is not, and that's, of course, China. And Russia is in that list, just the next step down. I don't see how America can keep spending the kinds of dollars it spends on a military going forward. Now, will China increase its spending? I don't think so. They don't seem to be interested in military interventions and things. And to date, they have been more than happy to step back and say, okay, Russia, okay, the United States, Syria's got problems. You go in there, you send your people in there, we'll just stand back and watch. I don't know if that's going to change, but I think America, and again, Trump was so proud of the fact that he became president and he really increased spending again. And then he turned to people like Canada and the European Union and said, you guys have got to increase your spending too. And Justin actually has, I know that may strike you, you might not have heard that story, but he actually has increased. The goal has been to get it to be 2% of our GDP. Right now, we're around 1.7%. And if we can ever, I'm laughing about this, if we can ever figure out what to do about those fighter planes, the purchase that's been going on for the better part of 15 years. And again, we continue to be promised that a decision is imminent. If we ever replace those fighter planes, then that will probably help us get to that 2% level. And there is talk again of doing some more boats, some more ships, especially as the North is opening up. You probably know that thanks to climate change, the idea of a Northwest Passage, a boat passage through the Arctic, which was just an absolute fantasy from the beginning when they tried it. Well, now it's not so much of a fantasy. There's a lot of clear water up there thanks to global warming. We'll probably need to patrol that, because I think the next big international dispute will be about who owns what in the Arctic. The Russians have already suggested that they should own chunks of the water, which we think of as Canadian water. And then, of course, the Americans think they should have some, and the Danes think they should have some. And there's an island up there, by the way, that we've had this dispute with Denmark for the better part of 70 years. And every year, one Navy goes to that island, takes the one flag down, puts their flag there. And when the Danes go there, they leave some Danish schnapps. And when the Canadians go there, they leave some Canadian rye whiskey. And we've had this little battle going on for control of the island. So far, the wildlife on the island doesn't seem to notice there's a battle going on, but it will eventually become more important as we go. But militarily, I don't think we're going to see China rise as a military power, but the question is going to be, at what point does America realize it's bankrupting itself and its spending? One more quick thing on this. Many people have pointed to Trump's tax cuts. Look how wonderful his tax cuts were. We all love tax cuts. The tax cuts were supposed to cause people to invest in the economy and grow the economy. And that's not what's happened. Most of the businesses took their tax cuts and either increased dividends or they bought back shares, both of which jacked up stock prices. But jacking up stock prices is not the same as growing the economy. And while that was going on, the American government has been racking up tremendous debt. Now, again, I know we're all upset about the $340 billion that Trudeau borrowed. But in Trump's time in office, in his 4 years in office, America has added something like $12 trillion to its debt. Just an unheard of number. In fact, here's the funniest thing. If you go back over the last roughly 30 years and see when America got closest to balanced budgets, it happened under Democratic presidents. The presidents who were supposed to be the tax and spend liberals actually run the government most efficiently. And the people who are supposed to be I'm going to get tough and cut back, they're the ones who blow the budget on the deficits. So I don't know. I don't think Biden is going to come out in so many words and say, I'm going to cut back on the spending for the military. That's a good way to die. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's done quietly and slowly and just brings it down a little bit as you go, because there are other social issues out there that need to be dealt with.
Thank you, Norman.
Well,
Dave, I think we've just totally worn these people out.
Well, thank you, Marvin. I'd like to call on Ann Washington to thank our speaker. Ann? Oh, Ann, we have to unmute.
There you go.
There we are.
Well, Marvin, you are a hurricane. You have brought to us today a plethora of information crossing the world, information on economy, history, Margaret Thatcher, Obama, military, every possible thing that we could have thought about under the realm of economy, you have expanded upon. Your humor, the way you have personalized your experience in your buying your first home has made us feel that we can trust the words that you have said to us today. So I could go on a lot more with the thank you, but I think all of us feel that you deserve the biggest thank you that we can give you. It has been an expanding experience for me personally. And the other part is that you have also given us hope. At a time when things are looking blue, you have said that Canada is in a pretty good spot. So for that hopefulness, for that humor, for that awareness, that knowledge, that personality, we thank you.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. And I'm glad to be with you today.
And I haven't finished, Marvin, so in appreciation of your talk today, that we would like to give a donation to the bursary that you have established at McMaster University in honor of your parents, Carmen and Dorothy Ryder, which will assist students with their financial needs. Thank you so very, very much.
Well, thank you folks as well. And Dave, if you don't mind, let me just share with the people that it's a bursary, not a scholarship. Bursaries go to students in financial need. It's not necessarily based on their scholastic achievement. And as well, your donation is likely going to be matched by the province. And then those 2 bits of money will stay in that account. That money gets invested, and it's the proceeds on that money that creates the bursaries. So the donation from Probus will stay there in perpetuity, helping students not just in 2021, but in 2051 and in 2081. It will be there forever. So I definitely appreciate it, and I'm thankful for you to do that for us today. A lot of students will also thank you for that.
Thank you, Marvin. Much appreciated. Okay, Marty, back to you.
No, it's me.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, it's me, guys. Don Eagleson, what's the highest number on the draw list?
The highest number is 29.
Okay, thank you. I will, here's what our draw looks like, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to put it on full screen here. And can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay, here it goes. Well, tell us someone. Oh, okay, I think we have to respin.
Spin because it came right between
It was number 32.
We don't have 32 people.
No, he says only 31.
29. It depends who came on then, I think.
Yeah.
It's 29.
I think that's the highest number. Okay,
We were not last.
who's number 29?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Got to be somebody.
I'll volunteer.
Number, John, I had to step away for a minute.
Ross Crookshank.
Oh, Ross Cruikshank. Well, good for you, Ross. Do you know what, I forgot to repeat what the prize is. It's the $50 for gift certificate for Betula Restaurant, Bangkok Spoon Restaurant, Nellie James for the LCBO. Have you got a choice?
The LCBO.
I could send it back to somebody else.
You're gonna
I
turn
can't use it. I get fed here.
We have to spin again then.
Go ahead.
What did he say?
Go ahead.
Spin again. He didn't.
Okay, hold on a second. There we go.
So we look like number 1. Did you see that?
Oh no, don't stomp on 34 now. Come on.
Well, we get to 21.
Yeah, well, come on.
Who's 21?
That is Peter Dawson.
Who is it?
Peter Dawson.
Peter Dawson. Do you want one of those prizes, Peter?
Yes, thank you. I'll be pleased to accept the Bangkok Spoon prize.
Okay. Well, Brian Fortune will be in touch with you to arrange to get you the gift certificate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there you go.
Done.
And with that, we can turn it over to Marnie again.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for participating today. I know we've still got our chat sessions, which is going to be great fun. But most importantly, at this time, I would like to thank our three amazing techies, that being John Howard, Dave Allett, and Don Eagleson. Without these three, sorry, Ted Stark as a helper. Without these, we would not be here today and on Zoom. Dear, got to be careful your terms here. And but we thank them very, very much for all their hard work. And but also all of us in the management team and including my pal. Wait a minute. My pal, the cat. Wish you all a very, very safe and wonderful holiday and a Merry Christmas. And please be safe and take care. And we'll see you January 25th, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed after Christmas. And all the very best. Thank you again for being here. Bye-bye.
You.
Okay, everybody, can everybody hear me? Okay, what I want everybody to do is to unmute themselves. I'll send you a little note telling you to unmute yourself. And we're going to split up into, we've got, how many, Dave, have we got going here at the moment?
29 people altogether.
No, that's not 29. We got, that didn't include the management. So I'll set up 5 rooms, I think, maybe 6. So here we go.
There's a few people who are still on mute.
Well, they'll have to get off on
Okay.
the others. So we're going to do 6 rooms.
I don't know that guy either.
Well, you know what you do? That's John Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a year ago, dear.
Okay.
David, he doesn't want to be known as Dave.
I know that.
David Rickards.
Yeah, it just takes a minute here for me to set this up a bit. So hold on a second.
Oh, it's been done for weeks.
Maybe half of it was.
No, it was well filmed. Well filmed. Very enjoyable.
Okay, I am leaving.
Well, who's that?
I'm leaving.
Oh, sucker.
Bye.
Suckers, yes.
Okay, whoops.
Jerry, you're still hooked up. There you go.
Well, okay. So I'm going to recreate, I'm going to assign automatically. So you've got 15 minutes before you come. Oh, wait a minute. I made a mistake here. Hold on.
No.
I got to set it up to 15 minutes. So take a little longer there. Okay. So here you go. Have fun.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, the rest of you.
Oh my God.
Bye.
Bye, Gordon.
Bye.
What's going to happen here now?
Bye.
Oh, I see.
Hi.
Yeah.
I don't get in there.
You got to accept it.
What?
You should get a message saying join the rooms.
I don't see it yet.
I don't have a message.
No.
Oh, it says.
I have to leave.
Okay, hold on. I'm I'm gonna,
I don't see any join the room.
oh, I did something I shouldn't have, so,
And you're an expert, John.
no, I'm not, trust me.
I guess I must be hearing me.
The,
Nobody was in my breakout room.
no, I know, I'm gonna have, okay, hold on, we'll try this again, guys. A little bit of patience is a virtue here. They're all gonna.
Hi, John. It
Talking
didn't
long,
work. It was just me.
I know.
Oh.
Hold on. We're just gonna
Okay.
do.
I thought you did it purposely.
Very clear.
I didn't. I shouldn't have tried to do something here. That's why. By the way, I've stopped the recording.